And I want to preface the discussion with one of the discussions that I always get into when I talk about propositions or voter propositions and ballots is that I'm pretty much restricted to talk about the facts and issues, and sometimes that's a subjective discussion and subjective. People will say, well, if a proposition fails, this is going to happen. If a proposition passes, this is going to happen. And very often we talk about bond issues or things. That's always a little difficult. In this particular case, the failure is a fact because it's written into law for counties. It's not a guess or speculation or anything else. If in fact Proposition 100 fails, these things will happen because it's already discussed and written into the state budget. Pima County is a county that obviously is one of the 15 second largest. We operate the largest single hotel in southern Arizona, and it's called the Pima County Adult Detention Center. And it, on any given day, has an occupancy of about 1,900 individuals. And they're held there in custody by the sheriff. And the unique thing about detention facilities versus prisons is that most people in a detention facility are pre-trial. They're awaiting court disposition, which means in our system that they're presumed to be innocent until they're convicted of a crime. And so that's why it's a distinction between detention versus prison. We also have some sentenced individuals, but they usually are sentenced to very brief periods because of the nature of their crime and what happens to them. In this particular budget that was balanced by the legislature, what they said was we're going to try and supplement state funds with a 1-cent sales tax, and if that doesn't work, here are the things that are going to happen. And they're called triggers that got put into the state budget. And the triggers for the counties are really twofold. The first triggers are pretty easy to deal with, and it just basically passed on more cost to the county in operating the Superior Court and justice courts and paying that component cost of the criminal justice system. And we're used to having things passed along to us to pay. Just so far in the last 24 months of budget balancing in the state, we've had about $23 million in costs shifted from the state to the county, and that's been absorbed in our budget and accommodated. This next shift is one that is almost impossible to accommodate in the budget, and very difficult because of the order of magnitude that it is. When I talked about our capacity is really related to the facilities that we have, the detention facility on 29th Street and the detention facility in Ajo, Arizona. We have one there as well. If in fact this shift, and the shift in state prisoners and the trigger in the budget says that the county will house individuals who are convicted of a crime who have been sentenced to 1 year or less, or any individual in the state system who is serving the final year of their term. And what that means is that we get a very eclectic mix, and that usually less than 1 year are crimes that are typically nonviolent, possession related to drugs and narcotics, driving under the influence, multiple repeat offenders. But when you talk about having an individual released back to your care and custody with less than 1 year in their sentence, it could be bank robbery, it could be assault, it could be rape, it could be murder, it could be any of those crimes. The numbers, when we talk about the numbers are, last time we counted, 1,821. And when you basically say we have a facility that can house about 2,000, it's got 1,900 in it, the question then becomes, how do you fit 1,800 more, double that population in the county jail? With great deal of difficulty. The sheriff, and I asked the sheriff to look at 5 different alternatives. He's done that. Those alternatives range from short range to long range. Short range is triple bunking at the main jail facility, with taking over any of the detention facilities at the juvenile court, so that means juvenile detainees will be out, transferring adult women from the jail to the juvenile facilities, transferring remanded juveniles who are those who are remanded to the adult system because of a serious crime back to the juvenile facility, doing all of these trades and tricks. And it's, if you think about our capacity, we still then have to look at a contract placement of about 300 individuals. You begin to add up all those costs, and what happens is that you get a price tag, and everyone kind of gets a little shocked when we say this number. It's $50 million to house those individuals. And they say, well, how can that be? That's a huge cost. Well, if you look factually at the jail that we operate today, we operate it in its annual budget to operate it year-round, and for about 1,900 average daily census population, costs $44 million. That's in the budget today. So it's just pretty simple math. You double the population, they're going to double the cost. Every day that we hold somebody in our facilities, care, and custody costs $77 per person. And so that's how you get to those numbers. Now, the more difficult part of this problem is that I've seen triple bunking at the adult correction facility before. It happened in the mid-'80s. And then came along a federal court order. And the federal court order simply said, you have a population, it is safe to hold X, you will hold X, and if you don't, you're going to be under the direct supervision of the court, subject to fines and penalties. So what that means is you have to basically then look at strategies about how to reduce your population. That's called early release. It's called making judgment calls about who do you want to hold, who do you want to release back into the community. And so the community basically gets put at greater risk. One of the statistics that we do know is that as a population, the prisons have gone up, crime rates have gone down. And so the problem that we face is that, and we have the short-term issue of capacity, probably will lead to federal sanctions and intervention, which then leads to release and decisions about who or should not, who might not be kept in the jail. Long-range solution is a 5-year process. It takes 5 years from the day that you have money to build a new basic maximum security detention facility, because that's what the jail is. And the cost will be $150 million. And so we know that because we've built them and continue to, unfortunately, have to expand them. And so there's your long-range solution. Now, the short-range solution, and that's options 2 and 3 and some papers that the sheriff has provided. And all this is going to be online. Everybody can look at it. If you look at the 4th option, it's all stopgap measures within the community itself. And the stopgap measures talk about looking at vacant facilities, doing what we call the almost unthinkable, which is looking at the vacant hotel or motel, looking at and talking with school districts who might have idle facilities or schools that they're talking about closing and converting them to some type of detention facility. Last alternative that I think anybody wants to look at, but realistically it's got to be on the list. Whether it happens or not is another discussion. Probably not, because those facilities are so hard to secure, even if the community was going to accept that transition from a certain use to another use. So those are kind of the impacts. They're very real. They're not imaginary. Nobody's making them up. They're in the legislation. It balances the state budget. It talks very specifically. We've got the county attorney look at the language, and they concur that there's probably no challengeable component in it. And if in fact it fails, we have to figure out how to house another 1,800 prisoners, criminals who have been sentenced to serve a term in the state prison that will basically become the responsibility of the county. We cannot pay for it except through taxation, and what that means is that your property tax that you look at that bill will inevitably go up to offset these costs. There's no free lunch here, and so those costs will be incurred and they will be real. So, thank you.